Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And I'm delighted this evening to be joined by Bernard O Keefe, and he's here this evening to talk to us about his latest book, which is called Private Lessons. Thank you for joining us, Bernard. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So we're going to talk about firstly about your book, but firstly, you had a career in advertising and you were also a teacher.
Yeah.
This is your fourth book, I believe.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And you had a career in advertising, like I said before, and D.I. Garibaldi. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm just getting a message to say, are you all set? Yeah, so, hi. Yes, we're all ready. That's okay. I had a bit of a moment there that we weren't on the right thing, but hi, Sam.
Hi. We're up and going. Yeah, we're okay. Yeah.
We are all good and going. Yes. So sorry. Yes. So we'll go back to where we were. And I was just saying that the D.I. Garibaldi is a second book that he's in the series. He's quoted in your blog, which I really loved, as a non-driving, country music loving, poetry quoting detective. And that really does sign him up, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah. He's also a QPR season ticket holder as well.
I did. Yeah, I like the football, although I'm an Arsenal supporter, so we might not get on.
Commiserations.
Yeah.
A good try.
Exactly, commiserations. Yeah. Yes. He's a really entertaining character. I really sort of warm to him, and I think he's funny and he's astute. Would you like to tell us a bit more about the series and also him?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, the first book in the series was The Final Round, which came out a couple of years ago, and the second is the one that's just been published, which is called Private Lessons. So Garibaldi is the central character. He's the detective, and as you said, he doesn't drive for reasons that are kept quiet in the first book, but which are revealed towards the end of the second book. And he's quite well educated, quite learned, though he didn't go to university. Quite well read. Yeah. And likes to let people know that he is quite well read.
Yeah.
He rides a bike. He can't drive, so he's driven around by his sergeant, D.S. Millie Uber Gardner, and he likes country music. He's of Irish Italian descent, and he lives in Barnes. Now, those five factors actually he shares absolutely with me. So when the first one came out, I was asked how much of you is in Garibaldi, and I had to give an honest reply that all of those things were exactly as I was, but that didn't mean that he's like me at all necessarily. No. But I have drawn on aspects of my character in his. And as I said, the first one came out a couple of years ago, which involved the investigation into a group of Oxford friends and a strange intervention to their annual charity quiz. But the second one, Private Lessons, which is just out, involves the murder of a private tutor who's found stabbed to death in the old cemetery in Barnes, which is a very spooky Gothic place. And Garibaldi's on the case, and as he investigates the case, he ends up investigating this dead man, the victim, Charles Gallen's work as a private tutor, and he becomes drawn into the world of private tutoring and keeps asking himself questions about how much a private tutor would get to know not only about the kids that they tutor, but about the families they work for. And in particular, families that do things as the very rich do, like take the tutor away with you on holiday. And then as he's investigating this and getting drawn into the world of private tutoring and the agency for which Charles Gallen worked, there follows a series of attacks and threats on other private tutors, all of whom work for the same firm, the Forum Agency. So he begins to wonder whether there is something that connects all these events and whether Charles Gallen may have been murdered for something that he discovered through his work for a range of families, including this super rich family for which he'd been working in Italy. So that's it, really. It's very much based on the idea of the private tutor having access to a family's life in a way, and being invited into the home of the family.
Yeah, because it is a very it's a very personal thing, and as you know, we're going to be very careful not to give too many spoilers.
Sure, no spoilers. Yeah.
But you know, it's building that relationship, isn't it? It's you know, it's more than a teacher. I guess even as a teacher, you build relationships with your students, but if you're going into their home and you're meeting their parents on a one-to-one basis, it's a lot more intimate.
Exactly. It's intimate, it's invasive, it's intrusive. And I mean, it's changed a little bit now, and not all tutoring happens on that basis, but it still does happen that the tutor comes to the house, sits down in a room with whoever they're tutoring, and what do the parents do? They kind of lurk in the background. Some lurk more than others, some disappear, some are very much a presence. So it was that really made me start thinking, and I spent a lot, as you say, my career in advertising was very brief and very unsuccessful. It was only a year or so. I put it in my biography to make me sound more interesting than somebody's taught for their whole life. I taught for 33 years, and as I was teaching, you realize that there was so much tutoring going on. I mean, the figures are nationally, I think it's about 1 in 4 parents who have tutors for their kids in some form. When it comes to London, that's much closer to 1 in 2.
Wow, really?
And that's a high number. I retired about 5 or 6 years ago, but it was well, endemic. It makes it sound like a disease, which maybe it is, but it was all over the place. I mean, I remember parents talking about things like, oh, and he did this and he managed to do this without any tutoring, as if this was kind of exceptional, like they passed some kind of drugs test or something. Everyone else was doing this, you know. So so that's really what made me think of it, was that if you know, obviously as part of the investigation, you look into their work as a private tutor, and what would it uncover. So you know, there are a range of families and a range of people that this guy was tutoring, and it just seems that a lot of the families and the parents may have things to hide.
Yeah, it reminded me. I had a tutor way back, way back, for my GCS. Well, it was my O-level English language, and it was a friend of my parents who was an English teacher, and he used to come around. And I was 16, so you can imagine how it. And we used to sit in the kitchen, and my parents used to go right out the way. But it was really awkward. I remember it just being like this guy who came in and was trying to get me to learn how to answer the multiple choice questions, so I passed, which I didn't, incidentally.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's a very strange relationship, and as you say, it's very invasive. I think in one of the team meetings in the book, one of the detectives says, well, you know, why are we looking at these families of the tutors? You know, if a doctor's patient was, you know, you wouldn't necessarily look at everybody he was treating, or if it was a teacher in a school, you wouldn't look at all the kids in all their classes. But it's because the nature of this relationship is so different. It's always 1-to-1, and it's actually in the domestic space. So that's really what started it off. Yeah.
So it was obviously, was it your teaching experience that really inspired you to sort of
Yes, it was that, and also my son did a lot of private tutoring, so I kind of saw it from that side as well. I've not done any myself, but it was just and also the growth, the proliferation of these tutoring agencies, and the number of teachers who were doing it as well to supplement their income. And even when you were teaching, you get offers. People would say, "Oh, could you give them, you know, some private tuition, etc., etc." So it's the fact that there's so much of it about, really. And also that it can be very. I mean, I was very conscious in the book not to make it entirely the kind of affluent middle class, you know, elbowing parents that were doing it. So I did try to stretch the kind of social stretch to include another kind of student that he was tutoring as well. So it goes from the mega rich with yachts in the Mediterranean to the White City estate. Yeah.
So the book centers around the murder of Giles Callan, as you said. He's found dead in the Gothic cemetery. and D.I. Garibaldi is brought in to investigate how, because it's quite a brutal murder, isn't it? It's not a when they first find it. I was eating my dinner when I read.
Yeah.
So when anybody reads it,
yeah.
don't be eating dinner when you're eating when you read the first few pages. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. But that's the only graphic. That's the only graphic description really in the novel. And the graphic description is really applied to the person who makes the discovery.
It is. It's not to do with the murder. The murders. I mean, the murders brutal as murders are. But it wasn't the murder that was brutal. It was
the circumstances of the person who discovered them. Yeah. So I accept that. But as with the final round, I mean, the violence is kept very much out of sight or off the page.
And I quite like that in a book. I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind. Interestingly, I prefer to listen to someone reading me more graphic than I do reading it myself. I don't know.
Right.
I think because if you could fast forward if you want to.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So the violence is it's not really a very gory bloody novel at all. It's quite traditional in that sense.
Not at all. Yeah, no. And so was it quite easy because obviously we weren't going to give away the reason of the motive, but did that sort of idea come to you, the motive, did that come to you quite quickly?
No, it's really strange because I mean, obviously you go through a lot of edits and a lot of drafts, and it's a kind of process of layering. Really, you've got something, and then you keep putting another layer on to complicate it, and the actual solution as such came to me very late and unexpectedly, and again, it's difficult to talk about this without giving anything away. It was just a layer. It wasn't there at the beginning at all, and it was probably in about the second it was probably the second edit or the third, and it was something that moved it in a different direction. And you see, the trouble is when I write, the big question about whether you're a plotter or whether you're a pantster, and whether it's all color-coded wall charts and everything delineated precisely with slide rule precision, or whether it's what are we going to write today? I have some vague idea, but I'm probably more of a pantster than I am a planner. And so what happened with this was that I kind of had a direction and a kind of solution, but then you keep asking yourself, well, okay, yes, but what if? And so you just keep asking more questions of it. And I've said this before, but I operate on the principle that asking the question, what if, at various stages is a good one, because you're trying to surprise yourself. And if you don't surprise yourself, you're unlikely to surprise the reader.
No, I've heard other people say that, and I think that's true. People have said that, if you're surprised about how it turns out, that will come across on the page much more than if you sort of knew, because I like to be, as we said just before we came on, I like to be surprised, and I was surprised in this book, and I like that. I don't want to, for me, it's, some people want to know how it happened, and they want to be able to guess, whereas I like to be, oh, I didn't see that coming, sort of thing.
So, but as long as when you say I didn't see that coming, but now that it's come, I can see why.
I can see. Oh,
as opposed
okay.
To, I didn't see that coming because it's ridiculous.
So, where did that come from?
I hope this isn't.
No, not at all. I've got a couple of questions that have come in on the chat. So Sam says, did you celebrate the publication day for each book?
The first less than the second, because the first was in the pandemic, and so it was limited, and there couldn't be a launch. But the second one, I was able to have a launch, and I was able to have a launch at Barnes Bookshop, which was great, because they are very much set in Barnes, which is where Garibaldi lives, and as I said earlier, where I live. And so it was great to be able to have the launch actually at the Barnes Bookshop, because they've been a great supporter Garibaldi and the series. So that was good. It was good to be able to do that.
That's really nice to have a local one, because they tweeted today to say we were coming on. So and I thought, that's
no, they're great. I mean, obviously independent bookshops are important things and we need to value them and treasure them. And Barnes Bookshop is just a brilliant one, and I'm very lucky to have it there. And they've been really supportive, and they're very supportive of their local writers as well. So it's great. Been really good. Yeah.
And Laura's saying, hi both. She really enjoyed the audio version of the final round, and she's looking forward to this one, the next in the series. So, you're in for a good, you're in for a good time, because I really enjoyed it. I think,
good.
So the first, your first two books. This is your fourth book.
Oh right, yeah.
Your first two books are sort of novels, aren't they? They're more.
Yes.
So what made you just? Yeah, sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say, what made you decide to go right into the crime novel genre?
Okay, right. Well, the first two, I self-published the first two, as opposed to things which are traditionally published with Muswell Press.
Yeah.
The first one was a mainstream adult comic fiction novel called No Regrets, and then the second was a young adult novel called 10 Things to Do Before You Leave School, which I kind of wanted to do because of my experience of teaching and working with young people. So the question that you've asked, and it's one I've been asked quite a bit, is what made me turn to crime? It wasn't. It's what I did. It wasn't what I planned to do in my retirement. My retirement was, going to be learning Italian and learning the piano and things like that. But I did end up turning to crime. I think the reason I did is probably something I'd always wanted to do. There are a couple of things about the first two novels, which weren't crime novels, in the writing of them that I particularly enjoyed. And I realized that in both of them, I'd withheld information about certain things throughout the novel. And I'd planted a few clues as to what this information might be, and then revealed it towards the end. And looking back on it, I thought I actually really enjoyed that process. And of course, it's exactly what you do in a crime novel. A crime novel is entirely about withholding information and choosing whether or when to reveal it. So you can probably hear the cat in the background.
I can hear the cat. I was thinking, is it mine? Because mine's really noisy.
Yeah, she's very old and quite noisy, so apologies for that. I might have to go and let her out in a minute. So I enjoyed that aspect, and I realised, well, actually, I'd quite like to develop that. And of course, writing a crime novel would be doing that exactly. And I'd always enjoyed reading crime fiction, and I think it's something that I'd always wanted to do. I think the other thing about wanting to write crime is I spent a lot of time teaching English. And so you spend a lot of time teaching very literary texts. And I taught texts myself, which I struggled to get through. And then I was faced with classes of 20, 30 kids who were clearly struggling as well, not least because I was trying to teach it to them and I was struggling. So I thought, well, actually, for relaxation, I read a lot of contemporary fiction and stuff like that. When I really wanted to lose myself in a book, I would turn to crime fiction, largely because in crime, there are things that make you want to keep reading. It's prioritized, this whole idea of what's going to happen next. I mean, the very title, Whodunit, a mystery, suggests that there are things you want to find out. And so in crime, all those questions about who, what, why, where, when, they're kind of prioritized. And that leads, in a good crime novel, to very much a page-turning effect. And I think that's what I wanted to do, to write the kind of novel where there is this kind of narrative compulsion to find out what's happening and what's going to happen next. So that's probably why I decided to do it. I'd always enjoyed reading it. I'd always turn to it when I wanted to lose myself in a book. And I wanted to write something which would want people to turn the pages to find out what happened. I seem to have lost you in my vision. Are you still there? Hang on. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm still here. Are you still there?
Yeah, I've come back. I don't know what happened there. We just disappeared for a second. So
right, okay.
Apologies.
No, not at all. I thought I didn't know what to do.
I thought I was just going to refresh, because I remember Sam saying before that when that happened once before that she needed to refresh. So I pushed did the refresh button. So apologies if you're so it looks like we're still online because I can see Sam's just posted a question. So do you want to sort your cat out?
Yes, I will. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Hang on. Right.
We'll have a just like I'll have to do some sort of infill for her.
Joe, you take the cat.
Don't ever work with cat animals and children, I believe they say.
There we go. There we go. The cat is elsewhere.
Yeah, that's okay. I said they say don't ever work with children or animals, don't they? So
yeah, well, that's right. Or computers.
Yeah. Sam's asking what you're working on at the moment. Actually, one of my questions was about so basically this is book 2.
Right.
Will D.I. Garibaldi be making a sort of hat trick in the football terms?
Yep.
And can you tell us anything about it?
The third one, I finished the third one. It's with the publishers. It's going to be out next year, but I'm waiting to do final edits on it. And that's the third in the Garibaldi series, and it's called Every Trick in the Book. And it involves, well, it involves the murder. It's a bit meta, a bit self-referential, but not in a heavy way. It involves the murder of a crime writer who was murdered in exactly the same way as the victim in his crime novel.
Oh, interesting.
So the investigation it's quite a bookish book, and the investigation is trying to see whether clues to the murder can be found within the pages of his novel.
Oh, I like that. So, I like the sound of that. That sounds really fun.
Yeah. So it builds on the idea of, I mean, because I've always asked, who have you based that character on? Or that's him, isn't it? Or that's the bloke who lives, and this develops that really, the idea of to what extent a writer in a novel will be drawing on real life experience or modeling characters on people that they know. I mean, there's the disclaimer inside every book is any resemblance to characters is unintentional. That's inside everything. But there are some great cases, historical cases of writers who've been, sued or assaulted,
really?
and in one case murdered. Yeah, I can't remember what they are now because my mind's on the next one. But these feature in the novel, so it's very bookish. And the crime writer is murdered, is found dead the morning after the last evening of the Barnes Literature Festival at which he was speaking. Oh. So it's one for book lovers.
Oh, it is. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in reading that one because we love a book festival and we don't want murders at book festival, obviously, but we do like a booky book. And so I think that one will be really so. And then when's that one?
It is a booky. It's a booky book. And in answer to the question about what I'm
working on now.
I'm working on the 4th now. So.
And can you tell us anything about that one?
I can't really. It's too early. I'm very superstitious about saying what books are about. The third one is okay because I know it's going to come out next year. But when things are in a kind of embryonic developmental stage, I've got this real thing about telling people what it's about because you just live in fear of giving the explanation, and you just look at the face going blanker and blanker. And such a slow shake of the head of disbelief that anyone could be thinking of writing something so silly. So I tend to keep it to myself till quite a late stage.
Fair enough. I think that's.
But all I'll say is it may involve masks.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about you're with the Muswell Press publishers, which is a small sort of independent publisher. And is book 3 going to be with them as well? Is that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the deal with them was for 3 books. So we'll see. But it hasn't stopped me writing the 4th. So there we go.
No. Well, I think as well is because obviously you can tell that you enjoy writing them as well, and because you're sort of retired, it's not your full-time job, although it probably is your full-time job.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's not quite full-time, but yeah.
Yeah, because actually I wasn't sure because I knew that you were a teacher, but I was going to ask you, how was moving from teaching to writing a big decision, but you obviously retired and then started to write?
Yeah, I was writing while I was teaching, so
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of, obviously when you've retired, you've got more time to do it. But I don't spend all day every day at it. But when I'm at it, I try to develop some kind of routine and rhythm. So
yeah. So are you, because you mentioned about being a plotter or a pantser, which I was going to come to.
Yeah.
But do you have a routine with your writing? Do you sort of,
I do, yeah. When I'm in the middle of writing something, I tend to get going early in the morning. Sometimes quite early. I mean, I tend to rise early, so okay, sometimes I'll be at it at sort of 7:30 or whatever.
Wow.
And I aim to. I suppose I set myself a word count. I try, if I'm in the middle of doing something and I'm banging out the first draft, I'll try and do 2,000 words a day.
Oh, that's a lot.
Sometimes that is quite a lot, and they won't all be good words, and
No.
not many of them will survive the final cut, but they're there. I mean, it's better to get something on the page that you can cross out and work with than have nothing there at all. So a lot of it really is terrible, but it's there. And sometimes that can take a while. Sometimes it can come very easily. Sometimes you'll write many more than that. And I have this very strange. Actually, I had it here, and I can't remember where I put it. Where is it? I have this very strange technique which I tried. It's going to make me sound crazy, but there's this thing called the Pomodoro technique.
I know that. Is it 20 minutes or 25?
Yeah, 25 minutes. You get one of these tomato, hence the name Pomodoro, Italian for tomato. And you set it for 25 minutes, and then after 25 minutes, the bell goes off. I can't remember who developed it, but they seemed to think there was evidence that the optimum period for which you could concentrate properly was 25 minutes. And I think it was some undergraduate who was studying for exams, and he used this technique of 25 minutes. And then after 25 minutes, you have to take a break. And walk away, do something else for about 5 minutes, and then go back, and you could do another one. And I must admit, I started doing this, and it didn't work at all, largely because the ticking drove me mad. And you were trying to write, and this thing was ticking. But in time, I actually got to use it, and it got to work quite well. And after a while, the ticking, far from being an irritant, actually became a kind of, like Pavlov's dogs. You're associating the ticking of it with actually writing. So what I do, this is, I don't know why I'm revealing all this stuff, but what I do is I measure it's a way of measuring your productivity. So how many Pomodoros have you done? So getting back to the routine, I'll aim for a certain number of words, but sometimes I'll change it and aim for a certain number of those. How many 25-minute bursts did you do? And sometimes it seems a bit odd, because sometimes if you're on a roll, the last thing you want to do is be interrupted by a tomato timer ringing in your ear when you're just getting to a good bit. And so sometimes you ignore it, but it has worked for me. Everyone needs their little quirks and obsessions, and this is mine.
Somebody on Twitter was talking about it today, and they said they were doing 50 minutes at a time. So I don't know whether different sort of I think there's definitely something in that just keep on going. I think there's definitely something in walking away and just having a cup of tea or something.
I mean, the thing about this 25-minute a go thing and then take a break, I was thinking, well, look, that's great, but you do an exam that lasts 3 hours. How does that play into that? You're not going to bring in a tomato and have a break.
I don't think you'd be very popular, would you, if that was going off every 25 minutes?
But anyway, so in terms of routine, it tends to be mornings. If I'm on a roll, I'll aim for 2,000 words, and sometimes I'll use this and just keep a note of how many I did. It's actually quite handy, because at the end of the day, you can look back and say, well, actually, how many minutes did I focus on writing for? I mean, if you do 4 of those, what's that for? 80, it's about an hour, nearly 2 hours, which isn't a lot, but you can actually get quite a bit done.
No, that is interesting. No, I mean, I have heard of it, but I've not used it. But I think it's what everything that makes your, everything that's, whatever makes it work for you is what you need to do, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So we sort of touched on the plotting, pantsing things. So when you started the book, did you just have a sort of a seed of an idea, and then it sort of gradually.
I think what happened is I started with the idea that the victim would be a private tutor.
Yeah.
So I knew that the novel was going to focus on his activities as a private tutor, and it would look at that generation of recent graduates who are looking around to do something, and they fall into tutoring as a way of giving them some money while they pursue their dreams. And I knew that because of that, I wanted to look at the different kids that he was tutoring, different range of backgrounds and families. And it really came from that. But in terms of plotter and pantser, I'm one of those people. I'll, as I said, ask the question, what if? I mean, I'm not sure I always had this solution there at the beginning. And in the first novel, certainly, I changed my mind sort of halfway through about who I thought was going to be the murderer. Which is fine, but it does have implications because you have to go back and change quite a lot of stuff. You seem to have gone again.
My internet tonight. It's
Oh, we're back. We're
back. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my internet tonight. It says that I've got like 5 bars, so it shouldn't be going off. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Oh, I was saying that sometimes I change my mind about who the murderer is, which is all very well, and it might be a nice idea, but it does have implications because you have to go back and change everything, absolutely everything. You have to go back to the beginning and look at everything. But so it's a combination of the two. I have a rough idea of where I want to go, but at every stage I'm always open to new possibilities, which I think makes it more difficult, but ultimately makes it more rewarding and kind of
Do you
exciting.
sort of find your characters, they sort of come into their own as you get writing? Do you sort of find them going off in directions that you've not really?
Yes, it's odd. I mean, I've heard other writers say that, and you think that's a bit crazy. The idea that a character has a life independent of you, but it can happen. I mean, you just suddenly obviously the character hasn't done it independently of you, but you just get this sense that they're living to the extent that they're able to do things that surprise you. I think it comes back to that question: what if? You keep saying of your characters, maybe, well, what if they did this?
Yeah, and I guess as you write and the characters become more known to you, what they can do or what they've done becomes more apparent because you just know them better. Whereas in the beginning, they're just a name, aren't they? Or
well, that's right. And obviously, with the second book and having written the third book, you're getting much more familiar with them. The characters develop, because the thing about writing a series that I discovered is the whole idea of the two narrative arcs. There's the short narrative arc, which is the events of the novel and the case and the investigation of each book.
Yeah.
And the longer narrative arc, which will develop over the series, is what's happening to the characters and their relationships and in their lives. So there are changes that are happening, in terms of Garibaldi and his relationship with his son and his relationship with his partner and relationship with the team that he works with. So they do change and they do develop. And I think the more that you write them, the more rounded they become. I mean, I have a sense of what Garibaldi's past is and what's made him what he is, but the reader isn't getting all of that at one time. It's like the whole iceberg. You've got to know the whole iceberg and give them the tip.
Yeah, because
I think Hemingway or someone.
I think I think that with him, he's, like you said, you don't want to give it, obviously you don't want to give it all away in book one, because when you started, did you always know it would be a series? Did you?
Yeah, well, yes. What happened was, when I got this great agent, and when I submitted it, she said, I assume this is part of a series, and I actually thought so. My wish was, yes, of course it is. Good
answer.
But once it had been suggested, I realised, of course, that's exactly what you want to do. But I think it's rather sort of kind of over ambitious to set off. I'm now going to write a series. I just set off to write a novel, a crime novel with a detective, and then once the idea was planted, it was obvious that that's what you should be aiming for.
I always like a series, because I think, the characters, you don't, if you have them for just like one book, you never really get to know them, do you? And I think you know, we all know, you know, we've all got favorite, you know, sort of detectives, you know, whether it's Poirot, whether it's, you know, Midsummer Murders, or whether it's something, you know, more, there's the, you know, more graphic ones, you know, you've got Rebus and all those sorts of, you know, that's what it's tried and tested, isn't it? People like to know.
It's like a brand that you know what you're getting. You know,
Yeah.
if it's a Rebus novel, you know what you're getting.
Exactly.
So it's the kind of reassurance of that particular brand and that particular name.
Yeah.
So, you know, what one hopes that you like the first Garibaldi, you see the second, say, well, I know what I'm going to get in that. So, and one hopes that you don't get disappointed or surprised because it's not what you expected. So I think the development of a series is like the development of a brand that you trust and that you have confidence in. That sounds a horrible advertising type answer. I only spent about a year in the business. So.
Well, I think that's very impressive. I think the marketing's coming out now, isn't it? So Garibaldi, you know, like most people, he's got stuff going on in his background, and he's not, you know, he's not your sort of tortured detective, is he, really? I mean, he's got stuff that's happened, but he's not, you know, he's not, I'm sort of thinking of, you know, the ones who sort of have drink problems, and, you know, I'm thinking of Morse and people like that, you know, that have, you know, they've got like a sad background, and, you know, but he's got his partner, he's got his son who's, you know, who's at university, and he's quite concerned about him, as parents are. And the book, without giving any more spoilers, it's quite a lot about growing up and friendships and parenting, and in lots of, you know, with the tutoring and also with him. So I think that's the best way I can put it without spoilers. But was that quite an interesting way to sort of thread into his life and to the murder as well?
Yeah, well, I think because if you're tutoring, you're dealing with a kind of a set of anxieties. I mean, the parental anxieties about the child, and a concern that the child should do well, which is why you hire the private tutor. And you're also dealing with the kids' anxieties as well. Because the way I write is that I don't limit myself to one point of view. So you go into other characters' perspectives and points of view. So you get a sense of the anxieties that kids have growing up. You get a sense of the anxieties that parents have about growing up. And you also get a sense of the importance of friendships in growing up as well. Not only in the group of tutors who form a kind of friendship group as well. So don't want to give too much away on that.
It was when I was writing the question, I was thinking, now how am I going to put this without giving too much away? So I thought I'd leave it at that. But yes, it was interesting. And with the sort of you've got book 3 going on. So with book 3 and possibly book 4, do we find out more about, you know, is there more to know about him?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Garibaldi, I mean, you say, I mean, he has got a troubled past, and it's one that does affect him, and it manifests itself in some rather strange ways. And you see more of that as the series develops, and more of an explanation of why what his troubled past was. And there are kind of 2 particular moments in the past that caused him this trouble. So he's not a tortured soul in the way that other detectives are. In that his present is sort of like a complete mess of misery that has to be drowned in drugs or violence or excessive behavior.
Or beer.
Or one sort or another. So in that sense, his kind of present existence is kind of normal. But then there are these intrusions which affect him, which are to do with the troubles he's had in the past. So, I mean, he's not a tortured soul in the way that other detectives are, but he has got his problems and his issues.
He's got some baggage, hasn't he? So
everyone has baggage.
Everybody has baggage. He would not be normal, would he, if he didn't have
He wouldn't
baggage.
be normal if he left his baggage behind, or was baggage free, or had somebody else to carry his baggage for him.
Sam's saying she saw Rob Parker interviewing Lauren North, and they both said 15-minute bursts work really well for them. So
right, okay, well that's interesting. I mean, I do find the 25 minutes is once you got used to it, you would get into the rhythm that's dictated by that, and so I mean, I do recommend it. Anyone, I mean, I know writers and everyone's looking for things that increase productivity, but it really has worked for me on occasion. Sounds crazy, but it has helped.
Oh well, we'll have to give it a go. So the book was very cleverly written. I can say that without any spoilers. And it hides clues. Was that difficult to hide the clues so that, like you said, it's fair, but
yeah. Well, as I say, for me, it's a process of layering. So it's not as though on my first draft or second draft, those clues were there.
No.
It was when you realize what the solution is going to be that you have to go back and plant the clues and make sure that they're fair and that they're there without making them too obvious. It's a tricky balance, because as I said earlier, writing all fiction is about withholding information. I mean, even if you're writing War and Peace or a Dickens novel, you can reveal absolutely everything at the beginning about who dies, who lives, who ends, and some novels do. Very few though. So everything is about withholding information. So getting the balance right about giving enough information to make the solution plausible, but not giving too much to make it obvious is quite a tricky one. But in this case, once I have the solution, you go back and you plant them, and if there aren't enough, you put them in, and if there are too many, you dilute it. So it's a tricky. Yeah.
Is it enjoyable though? Do you enjoy that part of it?
I do enjoy it. I mean, I said, someone asked me what's it like writing crime fiction as opposed to normal fiction. I said, well, it's the pain of writing with the mixture of pain and joy that comes from doing a crossword puzzle. I like crossword puzzles. I'm not very good at them. I mean, I like Colin Dexter, who was a great influence on me. Of course, was this national crossword champion, and Morse was named after one of the winners of crossword competitions. But I do like them. I enjoy them. So it's part of that. It's making. I mean, a good crossword, everything fits, and you can see why the answer is as it is. But there are bad crosswords as well, where you think, well, having seen the answer, I still have no idea how that clue leads to it. So it's a combination. Yes, I mean, I get pleasure from writing, and you get pleasure from putting in having a problem and trying to work out a solution. Though sometimes when you're doing it, you think, why am I just not writing a normal novel where I can just write about people having a bad relationship, or
well, there's probably things in that as well, isn't there, that you're writing that novel? It's like writing anything, isn't it? It's like when I'm doing essays and things, you just think, why am I doing this?
Exactly. Yeah. So there are times when you think, well, it would be so much easier if I could just write about a bloke who likes football and music and goes out in the pub and gets into trouble, something like that. So but on the other hand, actually having some sense of conventions, and although there are no rules for crime fiction, there are certain conventions that you feel you have to follow. Like there will be a murder, there will be a case to investigate, there'll be a process of investigation, there'll be a range of suspects, there'll be a range of interviews and meetings, there'll be some there are conventions, and in a way that can actually be quite liberating as opposed to constricting. So it kind of cuts both ways. But sometimes it ain't easy, that's for sure.
No, well, no, I guess, but nothing really. I guess it is. Although it's a great job, it is a job, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned I was going to ask you about your favorite crime writer, and you mentioned Colin Dexter. Is he your sort of? And you said, and does he is he your sort of favorite, and has he inspired your own writing?
Well, I've been asked this before, and there are two writers I always cite as the ones who inspired me most. And the first one is Andrea Camilleri, who's the creator of.
Well, I was going to mention Montalbano.
Yeah, and I've read all of them.
He's a tortured soul.
Well, yes. Well, everyone is, I suppose, ultimately. But and the thing about Camilleri in particular that inspired me was when I discovered that he didn't publish his first Montalbano novel till he was nearly 70. He became a bit of an inspiration. Really? No, it's extraordinary. Wow. It certainly is. He'd written some other things before, but his first Montalbano novel was either he was in his mid-60s or getting on towards 70. And then after that, he did one a year. He did about 30 novels after that. So there he was, the ultimate late starter. So somebody who was getting into it when they retired, it was just a brilliant kind of inspiration. And obviously, Garibaldi, Italian name, Montalbano, 4 syllables, etc., etc. So he was a huge influence, and also Colin Dexter, because I mean, when I was a kid, I did read Agatha Christie and Conan Doyle and everything, but I think it was Colin Dexter who really ignited my enthusiasm for crime fiction. And when I was teaching in a school near Oxford, which obviously is where Colin Dexter lived and where the Morse novels are set, I got to know him a little bit because I invited him to talk to the sixth formers about detective fiction, and I also interviewed him for a local newspaper. And it just had a kind of, I think it had an impact on me at some quite deep level, and I thought I'd really quite like to do that. And he was fascinating. I remember he came to talk to the sixth formers, and I remember every talk he gave, he came about 5 or 6 times, I think. And every talk he gave, it might have been all of them, but certainly some of them, he began. It was a great, as a teacher, this is the best way to start any talk or any lesson. He said to everyone, I'm going to make 3 deliberate mistakes in this talk. And the first one at the end of the talk, who identifies them gets this pile of free books. And it was one way to, really grab the attention and have people listening. And I was kind of tempted to use it in my own lessons, except I tend to make more than 3 mistakes in all my lessons, and none of them are intentional. And he was also, like in his novel, The Silent World of Nicholas Quinn, which I think was his first one, or was it Last Bus to Woodstock? I can't remember. The central character is deaf, and Colin Dexter himself was deaf in one year, which is one of the reasons why he gave up teaching, because he started off as a teacher. And when he came to give these talks, when it came to the time for questions at the end, I always remember this, and I can't remember whether it was genuinely an effect of his deafness or a really clever strategy to give yourself time to handle a question. But when the questions came from the floor, he asked me to stand beside him so that the question would be asked and I could repeat the question into his good ear. And from his point of view, he may well have heard it the first time,
but it gave him a bit of time.
Got it asked twice. So
I
always thought that was quite clever as well. So anyway, so Camilleri and Montalbano and Colin Dexter and Morse. So I do, and I've said this for many occasions, I do like to see Garibaldi as the bastard son of Morse and Montalbano.
Well, I watched Endeavour and then went back to Morse, because Morse sort of passed me by. And my husband watched Morse growing up with his parents, and then we watched Endeavour together, which I absolutely loved, and have gained that love of Morse by watching Endeavour and getting to know him. The other way around, rather than from young to old. I've from old to young. I've done the other way, but but no, I think his fascinating character as well, and that's really interesting that you're
no, he was fascinating. The interview was great because we went to a pub in North Oxford and had several pints of real ale, and he told me all about how he started writing and everything. And then, as I say, he came every year, so I'll sort of meet him, take him to lunch, and he'd talk to the kids, and they were always really good talks. Very clever man.
No, amazing. Sam's asking, what is the most satisfying part of being a writer and creating a world or characters?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think it's probably, it's both the most satisfying and at the same time the most kind of frustrating, which is the idea that you are as a writer, you are omnipotent. I mean, you can do anything. You can create anybody and create any world that you choose, which is terrifying and intimidating. But when you manage to do it, and when you do manage to get a book out there, and when people read it and say, "Oh, I really enjoyed it," or I really like that character, or I really believe this, that gives you great satisfaction that you've managed to do it. And I mean, I'm sure every writer says this, but whenever you get any positive feedback, or people just say something in passing, you just feel, oh, there we go. You just that's the most satisfying bit. I mean, just like living locally and it's all set in barns. If you walk past someone in the street and they just wave, say, "Oh, read your book, really liked it." That's great. You think, well, that's fantastic. That counts for so much.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, you have got that you've got that power, haven't you, to create those people, to kill them off if you don't like them very much, to make them, to develop them. I mean, it is, Sam's saying, it's really inspiring. It's sort of that,
that's kind of I think that's true. And so that is the satisfying thing. And so and when people respond like that, it's just
that's fantastic. Let's see.
What I was going to say is the other thing is that what I try to do in the books is that and a lot of crime writers do this, is that there's something that they're addressing as well. It's not simply an issue of there's a crime and they're going to solve it, but there'll be a bigger issue. So in the first one, it was the sort of the sense of entitlement of a bunch of self-important Oxford graduates, and in this one, I suppose it's this fixation with wanting your kids to do so well and getting in the extra help and wanting to beat all the competition, and if everyone else is doing it, I'm going to do it, and you're going to get into that school and you're going to get the grades and we're going to get anything we need. So the whole idea about that aspect of the education world, and also the kind of imbalance in the provision as well, because a lot of the people who hire private tutors are already, as pointed out in the book, forking out colossal fees to send them to private schools as well.
And so also it's
twice for it.
You sort of think, I was thinking what you were saying when you were talking about like the tutors and like the teachers having to obviously sort of top up their wages because of because teaching doesn't pay that well, and also so they obviously have very little life outside of teaching and tutoring. But I was thinking about the kids who've gone to school all day and then to have to come home and I was thinking about how I used to work in a school and knowing that after lunch things go out the window. So how by the time they get to 4 o'clock,
exactly,
is that the attention's gone, hasn't it?
That's right. And the tutors, I mean, this is touched on in the book, the tutors have to navigate that, and so they want to have a chat about something, and they want to make sure the parents are out of earshot when they have a gossip about this, that, or the other, and they know that they've been kids themselves. They know that little Johnny doesn't necessarily want this lesson on the old man in the sea after he's been at school all day.
Exactly.
So I think they're well aware of that, and they have to navigate that, so. And they do that a lot of them by establishing a relationship. And a lot of cases, tutors can get closer to the kids than the parents, particularly the very affluent, wealthy ones who think they're they're being a good parent just by buying in the help that's needed, not necessarily spending the time they need. So
no, it's a bit sad, really, isn't it? So before we finish, because I realised that we're nearly 8 o'clock, but we talked about your favorite authors, and so have you read anything recently that you would recommend to us watching this evening?
A couple. Well, crime or general, or any
either, both.
Okay. Well, crime first of all. I read the Simon Mason book, Killing in November, which is which has been shortlisted for the Daggers. I think the Gold Dagger. Which I really enjoy because it's Oxford, so it's a very different take on Oxford from the Oxford of Morse. I really enjoyed that. And his second one's just come out, and I'm going to read that. And the other crime novel I read recently was quite something, which is by Margaret Duehy, called Scorched Grace, and it's the first in a series featuring Sister Holiday, who is a chain-smoking, heavily tattooed queer nun. Okay.
Interesting.
And, very interesting. And set in New Orleans. And she's quite a character. And it's kind of quite Chandler-esque in the prose, but she's a fascinating character. So, and I mean, so a nun. And that particular type of nun. So I found that not just because I was named after a nun and I was brought up very much Catholic, so I found that very, very interesting. But that was good. So those are 2 crime things that I enjoyed recently. And in terms of other stuff, it's called Scorched Grace, and it's Muswell. It's not Muswell Press. It's I can't remember who is it. Scorched Grace by Margaret Duehy. I don't know how to spell this. It's D-O-U.
Oh, we'll look it up. We can put it on. We can put it on the chat. But that sounds. I
but
think
Scorched
that
Grace,
sounds
and then Killing in November by Simon Mason.
Yeah.
And the other stuff that I've read recently that I read Eleanor Catton's Burnham Wood. She was the Booker Prize winner with The Luminaries. Big novel. We were talking about big novels before we came on, but I did enjoy that. It's a bit of a sort of a clever eco thriller, but interesting, and I did enjoy that. I also read. I've discovered very late Barbara Pym. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Oh, I have. Yes. Well, I discovered her last
year. Just fantastic. I'm reading through them all, and I just finished Excellent Women, which is about the 5th or 6th I've read, and I just think they're fantastic. And and the reason I came to her is because I saw that she was a lot of writers I love, like Anne Tyler. She was one of their favorite authors, and I kept seeing her cited by lots of people I respected as being a favorite author, an underrated author. So I've been reading her. And another one I read, the last one, which I think all book lovers would really love, is called Blurb Your Enthusiasm by Louise Wilder. And it's an A to Z of literary persuasion. She was a blurb writer for publishers for a lot of years. And it's a great book, not just about blurb writing, but about writing, lots of insight and tips on writing, and lots of publishing anecdotes, which I think anyone who's interested in books would.
Yeah, no, that sounds really fascinating.
So that's it.
Yeah, no, Barbara Pym, they redid them all, didn't they, last year? They brought them all out with new covers.
New covers, that's right. Yeah.
And Persephone books, I think they had maybe a couple. They've got a couple of hers, I think, on there in their books. But she was fascinating. I mean, not crime, but fascinating.
Oh, about as far from crime as you could get.
Yeah.
Probably. Well, it'd be like who stole the biscuits, or where's the tea? Yeah. But so I've really enjoyed discovering her.
No, that's great.
It's nice when you discover somebody late, who's been there and you've got all their stuff to read.
Yeah, like the back catalogue, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's good. It's good when you've got that. So Private Lessons is out now. And so you can put it in front of the camera again. Yeah, that's good. From all good bookshops. All good and also libraries and Kindles and whatever, however you would like to read. Audio book. As Laura said earlier, she was reading that one. So thank you so much for joining us, Ben. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've really
delighted. My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
And if you'd like to come back and have a chat with us about book 3 in January, we'd love to have you on.
I would love to. I'm not sure if it's out in January, but I'd love to come back when it's out.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, whenever it's out, come on and chat to us. And hopefully we won't have... thank you for bearing with us. I don't know what's going on with my internet tonight. Last night it was gremlins in the laptop, and tonight it's internet. So, but I think
you're the internet, I the cat. So
but we're there.
It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Oh.